Now, what is our agenda today? We're going to first begin with the C Delta registration process. Remember, these sessions are C Delta sessions. So what we do, we extract content from the modules that you study so that we unpack them for you, and also to arouse interest in taking these modules. Therefore, for our new participants, we first take you through the registration process and briefly give you a C Delta overview of what it is about and how do you take part. Then we will do a quick recap on learner-centered approaches, which we covered in our previous session. In a case where we have new participants who are joining us for the first time, because there is a link between what we did last time and what we will be doing today. Finally, we will then dive into today's topic, which is to create learner-centered lesson design. Right, so we're going to then delve into C Delta overview, which is found in another presentation. Right. So this is the presentation about C Delta. Now, this program, C Delta is an acronym which stands for Commonwealth Digital Education Leadership Training in Action. This is a program which is funded by Commonwealth of Learning, and the goal of the program is to promote digital education in the Commonwealth nations. This is an international program which offers digital education leadership to all educators around the globe. The core or the focus of the program, it's not only to promote digital education, but it is also to produce leaders in the field of digital education. Now, the benefits of joining in the program or taking part in the program is that you gain understanding in the potential and also the need for being digital literate. You are also introduced to a set of tools as well as knowledge relating to digital education. The program is both for the teachers as well as for the students. Now, with the students, they take the first 3 modules. Then for the educators or practitioners, they take all the 7 modules. Because this is not an introduction about the C Delta, I would go straight to how do you register in order to take part in the program or in the course. It has 7 modules. They are self-paced, meaning you are able to take on the modules at your own pace, at your own time as well. But we do recommend that once you have started the course, you complete as soon as you can so that you don't forget what you are studying. Right, the benefits of taking the course, the additional benefits, the course, when you have completed the course, you would need to write a post-test. Right, you register. Once you've registered, you take on the pre-test, which is a diagnosis of your learning, which helps you to identify the focus areas of your studies. Once you've completed this post-test, you will earn 35 CPT DSAs and those points, but you would need to send us the post certificate. So you send the post certificate to zodumo@schoolnet.org.za. I repeat, zodumo@schoolnet.org.za. In addition to this SACE and no certificate, you also earn yourself an international recognized certificate that is in the completion of the post-test. These are the steps in detail on how do you take part. I will quickly go through these steps. The first one is that you register on the Seed Delta platform. The second one, you write a pre-test, study the course, then you write a post-test. This is the registration link that you would need in order to register. This is the video guide, the video registration guide, which assists you in completing the registration process. What is important when you register is that you register as an organization under SchoolNet South Africa. You scroll down until you see SchoolNet South Africa. Even if your school appear in the list, please do not click on the name of your school. And you don't register as an individual, you register as part of the organization. So that is what I would cover with regards to the Seed Delta introduction and overview, which includes the registration process. Right, so this is the activity that we did last week as our introduction to the session. We also look at the learner-centered education, especially focusing on the 3 key aspects about the learner. Remember, our topic is about learner-centered lesson design. Therefore, the focus is on the learner, and we need this understanding that a learner is seen as a unique individual. So if they are unique, we need to consider their background, we need to consider their circumstances, we need to consider that they also have unique strengths and challenges, including interest and aspirations. Then we look at the second aspect, which is understanding that we facilitate information to has unbounded potential that we need to know. And the last one that we looked at is that our students, they have this innate desire to learn. So as teachers, as educators, as facilitators, our job is to unleash that desire. Right, we covered the benefits of learner-centered approach, which we look at the list of the benefits. We also looked at the common concerns. These common concerns you see here are not facts. They are extracted from teacher comments, from facilitator comments, who share their frustration when implementing this approach. Then we ended our session by exploring or by unpacking methods for learner-centered design, which you need to consider when creating learner-centered design. I'm going to come back to this slide later on when we begin to share with you the lesson design model. Right, so now I'm going to start with today's topic, which is about creating learner-centered lesson design. Before we do so, I'd like us to sit and reflect or maybe ponder on this thought. What could be the possible causes where the lesson is a flop, or where the teacher failed to achieve the stated learning outcomes? What do you think are possible causes? We have a scenario here. You planned your lesson, you facilitated the lesson, or you taught the lesson. It was a flop. You were not able to achieve the learning outcomes or the learning objectives. What could be possible causes of that?
Afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
According to my view, for the lesson to go wrong, it's that most of the times, as and when teachers prepare, they don't prepare thoroughly. And in most cases, they don't prepare for all the learners. Remember, we have different learners in our classes. So as and when we prepare and plan, we have to plan for all of them so that we reach all of them so that we are able to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Wow. Interesting points you are raising there, Mabore. What you have shared with us, Mabore, you're mentioning a number of things. One of those, it's the planning, poor planning on the side of the teacher. The second one, you mentioned that when I plan the lesson as a teacher, I don't consider all learners, not only considering learners, but I don't consider the learning styles, different learning styles for individual learners. There's quite a number of things that I overlook when preparing or when planning my lesson if I get it correctly. I would add to that. It could also be that there wasn't sufficient content. It could be that the instruction itself was ineffective. We're now looking at the methods that were used by the teacher, which relates to what you have mentioned, Mabori. It could be that the assessment was incomplete on the part of the learner, or the assessment was not clear. Another factor could be that of lack of logical design, which I would like us to unpack today. So let's eliminate the others and say, what if the problem is with the design of the lesson? It is a manner in how the lesson was designed, because that is the key. Right, so we are now going to look at how do I create, how do I design meaningful lessons which will allow me to achieve the objectives, or which will allow me to meet the learning outcomes that I have set for myself. Now we are going to start the starting point before you even move to the planning stage is to first do, okay, we're referring back to this teacher who is reporting that, you know what, my lesson was a flop. Now we're checking, right? We're checking with this teacher. Did you do learning needs analysis? Now, when we, there's quite a lot that is covered in the learning needs analysis. We are going to look at the 3 Ws. We look at the who. When we look at the who, we're looking at the recipient of this information, the content. Who is your audience? In our case, as classroom teachers, or in your case as a trainer or a facilitator, you think about your audience. Now, when you think about your audience, you need to do the analysis there. You look at their background, relating now to the information or the knowledge or the topic that you will cover. You look at what are their strengths, what is their knowledge. What challenges, what learning challenges do they have? What are their interests? That is important to understand their interest, because when you facilitate learning, you want to meet the interest of your learners. You also want to use methods which align to what they are interested in. What are their aspirations? Because that will help you when you build the content in using relevant, authentic examples. So that is the who, which looks at the learner. How old are they? Right? The level, that I need to pitch my lesson on. Right. And then we move on to the next W, which is a why. Why am I teaching this content? Why am I teaching this information? Why am I teaching this skill? What is it that I want to achieve? I would exhaust this one in the next slide. Then we look at the last W, which is a where. Now, when we are looking at the where, we are looking at, am I going to facilitate this lesson in a face-to-face environment, or is it going to be an online session? If it's going to be an online session, which platform am I going to use? Are they familiar with this platform? Would they be able to access the platform? You see, this is helping you to plan accordingly. Is it going to be a blended learning where I would introduce the topic in a face-to-face environment, then I require them to complete some of the activities online? Therefore, what preparations need to be in place if that is the case, right? So that is your analysis. I'm limiting it to these three. There are a number of things that you may include in your needs analysis. You can use interviews, you can use surveys, you can use questionnaire to administer or to identify or to find answers to your questions when you do your needs analysis. Right, then we have done our needs analysis. Now on our drawing board, we are ready to plan or to design this lesson. Remember, it's not just any lesson. We are fully aware that we want to create a learner-centered lesson plan. We are going to consider these two models. The one on the left, it's called an assure model. And then the one on the right, we call it a design down, deliver up approach. For those who are following us at SchoolNet and our webinars, I'm sure some of you have attended a session where we unpack the assure model. You are aware of the assure model. That is why today I'm going to use the design down, deliver up approach to help you design your lesson. Remember, we are not saying that this is the approach or this is the model. There are a number of models which are available. You decide what works for you. Now, I'm going to pause and check with you if you are familiar with the Ashore model before I proceed. Is there anyone who is familiar with the Ashore model? Right, so let's come to the design down, deliver up approach. Anyone who is familiar with this approach when designing a learning program or a lesson, or who have used it before? You can also do the same. You can type a Y or an N so we know. Are we familiar with the design, deliver up approach?
It's me. I have used that design before for setting up my own lesson plans. And you should keep that design in your head, in focus when you are planning any lesson plan.
Wonderful. So have you used both or you've used the Ashore model?
I have used both before.
You have used wonderful. And what is your what is your take on both?
I like the purpose outcome assessment activities and then delivering up one better than the one that is here on the right hand side with the 6 levels there.
Reason being, sorry to put you on the spotlight.
That was fine. Okay, I'll tell you now.
Right.
For me, it's just easier to use the one on the left, but the one on the right, the one on the right, one on the left with the 6 steps is more or less the same. Let me see. You have the learners in your head. You state your objectives, your methods. What are you going to use? What media are you going to use? And the material is important. What is the learners predict? How are they doing it? And then how do we mark the learners' assessments afterwards and give feedback? Feedback is the most important one.
Hmm. Wonderful. Thanks so much for that feedback. Now, remember, the idea is not to say one is better than the other. Like you have heard, you can use both. You can use both. Yeah, that's what is important. You use what works for you. So we're not promoting the Ashore model or promoting the design down, deliver up. Remember, we have our own preferences when it comes to designing. The purpose is to expose you to these models which which can serve as your guide when designing your plans. Right. So I would focus on the design down as well, the design down, deliver up approach versus the Ashore model. But as Kate mentioned that they are more or less the same. When you look at the Ashore model, you begin by analyzing your learners, which is something that we mentioned earlier on about doing the needs analysis. The second one, it's where you state the objectives. Once you've stated the objectives, you then think about which methods am I going to use to facilitate learning, as well as the materials or resources that you would be using. How would you be using those resources and materials? Then you also think about learner participation. Number 5, when you are in number 5, you now think about our topic today, which is learner-centered approach, where you then embed different learning methods or different where you try to incorporate different methods so that you you increase learner participation. Then the last one, that's where you evaluate, which is the assessment, giving feedback, doing revision. Right, so let's now unpack let's now unpack the one on my right hand side, which is the design down, deliver up. I will tell you later on why do we say it's the design down, right? And why do we say it's the deliver up approach? Right, so we have 4 steps here. In fact, this design down, deliver up approach, it's an approach that you can even use not only for designing lessons, but also for teaching, whereby you would, where you have this topic, which is a complex topic, you have this complex topic, then you categorize it or you chunk it so that it's easy for your students to understand it better. So you are simplifying it for your students so that they are able to they're able to absorb the information in chunks. But we are going to focus on the design. Now, the first part, or the top part, that is where we start at the top, which is the purpose. Where you ask yourself this question: what is the purpose of teaching this topic? How can this purpose be achieved? What will my learners need to know and be able to do in order to achieve this purpose? Now, I was very tempted to use one example from one of the subjects, but I refrained from that because I don't want a case where I use English as a subject and someone who is not an English teacher would feel that it would have been better if you use a geography example. So I would leave that to you as an expert of the subject to make this information relevant to your subject, where you would think of the topic and then you ask yourself these questions, right? So when we look at the purpose may not only be the purpose of teaching the topic, but it may be the broader purpose of the subject other than the topic that you will be facilitating or you will be teaching. So what is it that you want to achieve by teaching that particular topic? Then I want you to underline, what is it that your learners need to know, and what is it that your learners would be able to do for you to achieve this purpose? By asking these questions, it leads you to the next step or the next box, which is the outcomes. Now, what is it that you want your learners to know? What is it that you want your learners to be able to do would inform you of what should be the outcomes of this lesson. Now, you may not limit this to the knowledge and the skills. You may also want to include attitudes. You may also want to include values, because remember, we are developing this learner holistically, not only academically, right? So once you have identified the purpose, right, which is the overarching purpose, and how you want to achieve the purpose, and you need to identify what knowledge do you want your learners to possess at the end and their skills, right? And then we move on to the next set of questions, which is, how will I know if my students have achieved the outcomes? So it means from the first set of questions, you are able to develop your outcomes, right? So you now have your set of outcomes. It may be 2 outcomes, 3 outcomes. Perhaps when you are, maybe let me also share this insight. When you are developing your outcomes, remember this. Try to use verbs. Why am I saying so? Anyone who'd like to try? Why do you think I'm suggesting that you use verbs, action words as your outcomes? My learners will be able to plan the house. My learners will be able to construct sentences. You know, I'm suggesting that you use verbs. Why am I suggesting that you use verbs? My learners will be able to draw. Right. The reason why I'm asking you to use verbs, remember, at the end of the day, you want to measure, you want to know whether you have achieved the outcomes. Now, if you are using verbs, you are using action words, you are able to measure the action, whether you were able to achieve that. Because if you say, for example, if you say, I want my learners to be able to draw a table of contents. Now, when you assess, what you want to see is the drawing of the table of contents or the compilation of the table of contents. You know exactly what to look for because you have used an action word. Right. What evidence will I look for? In other words, how are you going to assess whether your students have achieved the outcomes? This is really, I love this approach because, you know, it's like you are crafting, you are weaving this together. Now, how will I know if my students have achieved the outcomes? What evidence will I look for? Already, this tells you that you should have assessment in place. And with that assessment, you need to know what is it exactly that you would be looking for, because that what you are looking for would inform you whether you have achieved the outcomes. Then we move on to the last part of our questions. How will I prepare my students for the assessment? Right. Now you know that you've got the outcomes, right? You know that there should be assessment in place which will assist you with the evidence that you have achieved the outcomes. Now, if there is assessment in place, you cannot administer assessment. You need to prepare your students for assessment. And how will you prepare your students for this assessment? Then, which leads us to the activities. What teaching and learning activities would produce the knowledge I am targeting, which would produce the skills I have identified, or I am targeting in the outcomes, as well as the values. Now, look at that. We're looking at the teaching and learning activities. So it's not only the learning activities, but it's also the teaching activities, whereby as a teacher, it's the activities that you would use to facilitate learning. Now, once we are in the activities, this now takes us back to how would you facilitate the activities? How would learners engage in these different activities? It's not only the how, but another how is which methods am I going to use to facilitate the production of this knowledge, skills, and values, which takes us back to these learner-centered design methods. This is our key when designing. Remember, Mabore mentioned that what could go wrong with the lesson, that is when you don't cater for all your students. To ensure that you cater for all your students, you need to use a variety of activities. It shouldn't be only oral work, because if it's oral work, learners who prefer or learners who learn best when writing are disadvantaged. Visual learners will be disadvantaged here if they are not catered for. Therefore, when you are doing your plan, look at your activities. Try, of course, it's not possible to cater for all learners in one lesson, but ensure that, there is diversity in your activities. Even if it's one lesson, then in another lesson, you think, okay, in the previous lesson, the learners who were at an advantage were those who are visuals, because I asked them to do a collection of photographs. I asked them to draw something. It was more. The lesson was dominated by the visuals, which then disadvantaged those who prefer or those who learn best when writing. Therefore, this time I'm going to accommodate those students. Right. So that is your design. Right. So that is your design. It's going down. You are planning, ne? So you begin with the purpose, the outcomes. You think of the assessment, then you plan the activities. Now we change this and say, okay, now it's going to be deliver up. You are now thinking of the facilitation of this lesson, where you would administer various activities to your learners. It may be an activity where you, as a teacher, you present the lesson. Perhaps you use your PowerPoint presentation, you use your video, you use your podcast, you use your, perhaps a role play. You think of different methods of how you're going to introduce that. It's an activity on its own. It's just that it is facilitated by you as the teacher, right? And then you also think of other activities that your learners will be involved in. Now, once they have completed, or while they are doing the activities, you administer the formative assessment, where you say, okay, when they are busy doing this activity, I would be observing, I would be perhaps giving them or sharing them the checklist that they would use to ensure that, they are meeting all the requirements or the criteria defined for the assessment. You can also think, different ways on how you will be assessing. The purpose for assessing is for you to ensure that you are achieving the outcomes. Ne? You see, you are delivering up. So once you have administered the assessment, provide that feedback, you then go back and say, okay, did I achieve what I said as my outcomes? If not, what do? You would need to, what do you need to do? Someone wants to answer that one. Please go ahead and answer that one. You haven't met the outcomes. What do you do? It's in front of us, right in this slide, what you should do. Let me point it. Anyone else? The answer is
You review.
you review, yes. Anyone else? What do? You reteach. You revise until you achieve the purpose.
Yes, good afternoon once more. I'm looking at the issue of reteaching and reviewing.
Right.
As teachers, we have a problem of being stuck with finishing the ATP. Remember, the subject advisors will be on our heels. That is why most of the times we are not able to, maybe if even when I review and find out that I did not reach my goal, I'm not able to reteach because I'm looking forward to finishing the ATP. Maybe if the modus operandi can change to say, let us look more into inclusivity as and when we teach, and making sure that teachers are doing their best in schools. Let us not forget the issue of reviewing so that we are able to achieve our goals.
Boa, you're raising an important point here, which we covered a bit in our previous session. These are the concern you are raising. It's the concern we noted. Here, in fact, it's the first one. If I spend more time in class on active learning tasks, I'll never get through the syllabus, which are your ATPs. That is the concern. And in our session last week, we had a number of officials who were part of this, where they mentioned that, remember, the focus of learning is not only, underline only, is not only in completing the ATPs or checking the boxes that I have completed this. It is about ensuring that the learner understands what is taught, they attain the required skills, they are developed, and they are equipped for the world of work. But this remains a fact that, I'm going to be in trouble here if I don't finish the ATP. Now, the question is, how do I bring balance? What alternatives? What methods can I use whereby I ensure that I meet the outcomes? If I don't, I devise strategies. Number two, I also complete what I am expected to complete in terms of the curriculum delivery. So how do I create balance here? I'm now opening this discussion to all of us. How do I create balance? Because this is a fact. With active learning, I need to ensure that the learning, the activities, the entire learning is learner-centered. Remember, when it is learner-centered, we're looking at open-ended questions, problems here. We're looking at learners actively engaging in task and, unpacking curriculum themselves, which is time consuming. At the end of the day, I need to account. How do I balance? What are methods that I can use? So instead of like, okay, I'm reteaching this topic, what other ways can I use? What other methods? What strategies should I consider? Perhaps what you can also consider is it's peer teaching, where you don't necessarily need to stand in front of the class and repeat what you have already taught. You can get your students to teach one another. You can assign groups to teach one another. You can create, or you can look for videos, or maybe make copies of the information where you feel there are gaps. Give it to learners, then you assess until you know that the outcome is achieved. There's quite a number of things that you may consider. I'm on top of my head. I'm sharing these. Please do share the ideas you have that perhaps you already using that are working for you, strategies that you're using and they are working for you. Do share these in our chats. We also have our SchoolNet Facebook page, which we use to discuss. We can carry this conversation in that Facebook page where we share strategies, we share ideas of what is working for us. Not only ideas, we also share frustrations and concerns that we have, and we help one another there. I don't know, I think I had someone. Did you want to say something? Please unmute yourself.
We have two comments from viewer. She says, involve parents in learners' activities. Keep the records of these lessons. Use them later when things are normal.
Brilliant. Involve parents. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Viwe. Involve parents. That's number one. The second one, make use of technology. Create groups. Share the learning material in those groups where learners are able to revise what they have completed or what they have done in class. Thank you so much, Viwe. You see, already we are sharing these ideas. Right, so if there is nothing else and there are no questions, last time we had these three questions relating to what we have learned in the previous session and today's session. How do you see this working in your teaching? Are you already doing this now? If not, what's holding you back? If yes, can you share your successes like how Miss K did earlier on in our session? What do you think you need to work on? Thank you so much everyone for joining the session. I hope you benefited. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.